Good evening. It is truly an honor to bring a word of blessing for the opening of the Hutchins Center Honors. In the immortal words of Dr. Benjamin Elijah Mays, it isn't a calamity to die with dreams unfulfilled, but it is a calamity not to dream. It is not a disaster to be unable to capture your ideal, but it is a disaster to have no ideal to capture. It is not a disgrace not to reach the stars, but it is a disgrace to have no stars to reach for. The tragedy of life doesn't lie in not reaching your goal. The tragedy lies in having no goal to reach. Not failure, but low aim is sin. The inimitable educator and civil rights leader, Mary McLeod Bethune, put it more succinctly. She said, "Believe in yourself, learn, and never stop wanting to build a better world." That is indeed what our honorees tonight have done. And so, please join me as I offer this blessing. When I have concluded each phrase, please respond, "We give thanks." Gracious God and creator of all, for the gift of dreamers who imagine a world full of grace, love, beauty, and justice, we give thanks. For the gift of visionary artists, the curators, writers, vocalists, musicians, actors, filmmakers, who pierce our sleeping conscience, who amplify beauty, and who inspire laughter and healing, we give thanks. For the gift of athletes and their coaches and mentors, who not only inspire the young, but also remind us all of our own strength and rekindle our belief in sportsmanship and collaboration, we give thanks. For the gift of scholars, legal experts, civil rights advocates, and activists who use their voices to fight for the least of these and remind us that the moral arc of the universe does indeed bend towards justice, we give thanks. For the gift of entrepreneurs and philanthropists who find right causes and amplify their mission, we give thanks. For the opportunity tonight to honor and celebrate those who have set goals, who have reached for the stars, and in that reaching have lifted as they climb. May we say together, we give thanks. Amen.
Hello. Hello. All right, welcome. Thank you, Marla, for your beautiful message of peace and understanding, and to the Kuumba singers for their inspiring music. On behalf of my wife, Debbie, sitting here in the front row, it's my great pleasure to welcome you to the 2024 W.E.B. Du Bois Medal Ceremony. This is so special, I even put on a tie tonight. I can't tell you how meaningful it is to me, other than the tie, to have all of you with us together on the stage, everyone on the stage who's come to join us today. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here. I'd like to start by thanking all of today's presenters and readers in the front row. You're a distinguished group. Look at you. And we appreciate your taking the time to be part of this today. Next, I'd like to recognize the members of our National Advisory Board. I'm going to call out your names. Please stand up. Hold your applause till the end. Maybe we can get a little, I don't know if we can get any lights on them, but Bennett Ashley, Paul Buttenweiser, I see you, Paul, there, stand up. Richard Cohen, Burgess Colbert. I'm having trouble, I was supposed to learn how to pronounce his name in advance. I didn't know. Sudrid Gajaganfradar, is that? Thank you, sorry about that. Jeremy Henderson, James Manyika, and Dan Ross. Thank you all for being here. Bravo. Other people with us tonight who make this possible every year are the dedicated staff at Harvard. They're all over here and not seated in any one place. So I just want to ask you for a round of applause for thanking them for their tireless work tonight. In the house today, in addition to you, Skip, we have the Harvard women's basketball team led by Coach Carrie Moore. Where are you guys? There you go, right there. Well, I want to offer a warm welcome to Coach Moore, who's a first-timer here. We also have the Harvard men's basketball team led by the inimitable Coach Tommy Amaker. Where are you guys? Just as Skip has never missed a class as a teacher at Harvard, true story, Tommy has never missed an event here. Tommy, thank you for bringing the team. I would like also to especially welcome all the Harvard students who are here today. Professor Gates and I strongly believe that we do this for you. You are society's future leaders. It's great to have you here. We hope and expect that some of you will be on this stage in decades in the future receiving your award.
And you and I will be here.
And we'll still be here. Yeah, don't worry about that. Up in the balcony, we have students from 20 high schools in Boston and youth programs around Boston. Now, I like everybody other than the students in the balcony and the audience to be quiet for a minute. I can't read out your names, so let's hear you make some noise. Come on. Come on, keep it going. Welcome. All right, good. So, by the way, don't forget to mention your appearance today on your application when you apply to Harvard. As I survey the extraordinarily distinguished group of recipients we have on the stage today, I'm reminded they were here today because you stand on the shoulders of giants. Previous Du Bois Medal winners have included U.S. Representative John Lewis, Toni Morrison, Wole Soyinka, Charlene Hunter Galt, Oprah Winfrey, Quincy Jones, Jesse Norman, Steven Spielberg, Ruth Simmons, and Anthony Appiah. LeVar, creative geniuses who have preceded you include Pam Greer, Ava DuVernay, Shonda Rhimes, and Steve McQueen, as well as our nation's reader-in-chief, Carla Hayden. So, big shoes to fill. Kim, you follow in the footsteps of the great legal minds who have changed our world, like Eric Holder, Sonia Sotomayor, and Brian Stevenson. Kathy, before you from the world of sports, medal recipients have included Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, a little taller than you, Muhammad Ali, David Stern, the 1966 West Texas Miners basketball team, and Colin Kaepernick. Thelma, as you know, before you from the world of art came Betty Sayre, Carrie Mae Weems, Carol Walker, Carrie James Marshall, and your friend, Kehinde Wiley. Vice President Marquez, as the first black woman to hold the office of vice president in any Latin American country, you are... You are without precedent, though we did at Harvard bestow a medal on Nelson Mandela, so perhaps he can be a role model for the next steps in your career. Leaders from the business community who also have been on this stage include Ray McGuire, Vernon Jordan, Ken Chenault, Ursula Burns, and someone in the audience, front row, Richard Cohen. Give us a wave, Richard. As you might have noticed, Ice-T and Spike are not with us today. They send their sincere regrets, and Spike promises to be here next time. So now it's time to get started to induct all of you into this illustrious community. Skip, let's get the show on the road.
Give it up for Glenn. Thanks so very much, Glenn, for getting us started this afternoon so very graciously. The journey to the creation of the Hutchins Center, ladies and gentlemen, began with the generosity of two people, Glenn Hutchins and his brilliant wife, Debbie Hutchins, whose thoughtful and visionary philanthropy undergird all of the exciting work that we're able to pursue here at Harvard in African studies, in Afro-Latin American studies, in African-American research. Give it up for them. They wrote the check. They are the largest donors to any aspect of Black studies in the history of the discipline. That's what I'm talking about. That's genuine generosity. I'm Henry Louis Gates Jr., and it's my honor and pleasure to serve as the founding director of the Hutchins Center for African and African American Research, and to welcome you to the 2024 Hutchins Center Honors. Today's ceremony, ladies and gentlemen, reminds us of a duty that informs the mission of every member of our beloved community at Harvard: to work toward the improvement of the human condition, to pursue knowledge and understanding to the best of our abilities, freely and unfettered, and to treat each other with civility, compassion, and respect. We come together today to honor those who embody the goals of unifying rather than dividing, respecting rather than disparaging, engaging thoughtfully rather than dismissing out of hand. Each year, here in glorious Sanders Theater, we honor profound contributions to Black society and culture with the distinguished Du Bois Medal, named in honor of Harvard's first Black PhD, who actually, as a graduating senior from the college, addressed his class at their 1890 commencement exercises from this very stage. Isn't that amazing? To be standing in the footsteps of the great Du Bois, choosing as his topic of all topics the failed leader of the secession of the Confederacy. The title of his talk was Jefferson Davis as a Representative of Civilization, and believe me, he made the point that it was civilization gone disastrously wrong. Du Bois's address was hailed by the audience gathered in this theater, with one professor reporting to the press that it was a 10 strike, the bowling equivalent of a Grand Slam home run, and with the New York Times singling out his remarks, especially the next day, for commendation. During the program this evening, we will hear lyrical passages from Dr. Du Bois, read by our Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Sciences, Hopi Hoekstra, and our Provost, John Manning. Allow me the privilege to share another of these passages, one of my favorite. And it's from Of Our Spiritual Strivings, the first chapter in Du Bois's magisterial, canonical, 1903 publication, The Souls of Black Folk. And I quote, "The Negro is a sort of seventh son, born with a veil and gifted with second sight in this American world, a world which yields him no true self-consciousness, but only lets him see himself through the revelation of the other world. It is a peculiar sensation, this double consciousness, the sense of always looking at oneself through the eyes of others, of measuring one's soul by the tape of a world that looks on in amused contempt and pity. One ever feels his two-ness, an American, a Negro, two souls, two thoughts, two unreconciled strivings, two warring souls in one dark body, whose dogged strength alone keeps it from being torn asunder." That metaphor of double consciousness would become the most repeated and most riffed on figure of speech in the African American literary tradition for the next 100 years. Du Bois was born in Western Massachusetts in Great Barrington in 1868, 3 years into Reconstruction. Far from the traditional ancestral home of the African American people in the Black Belt in the Deep South, where 90% of all African Americans lived until the Great Migration began in 1910. Despite his physical distance from the center of gravity of Black life and culture, Du Bois nonetheless felt keenly, from a surprisingly early age, his destiny to become a leader of his people. And we see this commitment to prepare for leadership even in his coursework as an undergraduate at Harvard. Every Harvard student here today knows very well that expos is required in their first year. It's where you learn to read critically, amass evidence, and mount compelling argument. In Du Bois's day, remember, he graduated cum laude with a BA in 1890. Related writing and rhetoric courses were offered through the senior year, beginning with a course called English A. English C was junior year's rigorous training ground for Du Bois. He would actually earn an E, which in those days was an F, on one of his forensic essays for this course. And according to his biographer, Pulitzer Prize-winning biographer David Levering Lewis, the great philologist and Shakespeare scholar George Lyman Kittredge commented on Du Bois's essay that, quote, "By trying to put too much into one sentence, you confuse your ideas." What did Du Bois do? He took this criticism to heart. By the end of the 2-semester course, he had raised his grade from an E to a C. The next year in English D, he earned a B. And he would continue taking writing courses through his first year of graduate school in the history department. Why did he do this? He did this because he was training himself to use language in the richest way possible, to clothe his ideas most effectively, to make the most urgent case for the restoration of the rights of his people. You see, Du Bois understood that the mastery of what Cicero famously called the flowers of rhetoric was crucial if he was to capture in language the conundrum of being both Black and an American, the double consciousness in the quote that I just read. His studies coincided precisely with the horrific rollback of the rights inscribed in the Reconstruction Amendments, the 13th, the 14th, and 15th Amendments to our Constitution. A rollback concretized in the rise of Jim Crow segregation in the 1890s and its sanctification, scandalously, by the highest court in the land. Consider these sentences, ladies and gentlemen, from Du Bois. "Why did God make me an outcast and a stranger in my own house?" You can hear the wail in Du Bois's voice. With the erasure of Reconstruction, he writes, "The shades of the prison house closed round about us all, walls straight and stubborn to the whitest, but relentlessly narrow, tall and unscalable to the sons of night." Here, ladies and gentlemen, you can hear the mastery of metaphor and other rhetorical devices to utter a sentiment that still resonates, even to this day, with great poetic power, a century and a quarter after he wrote those words, in a language that's fresh and stirring, long after the specific events he was addressing have become the stuff of history. As he says in the remarkable passage that Dean Hoekstra will read, Du Bois embraced as his own the ideas of truth and beauty, so central to the very tradition of Western letters in which his people had been inexcusably diminished. Counterintuitive, perhaps, but through erudition and perseverance, he would disarm ideas that had for so long been used against his besieged people, ideas whose falsity he would expose, using the master's tools of scientific inquiry, to paraphrase the great poet Audre Lorde, to dismantle the master's house. Despite his eloquence, or perhaps because of it, and despite his spectacular career as a scholar, as a journalist, as a civil rights activist, Du Bois would experience devastating forms of censorship, both by his Black peers and by his white critics. In fact, he would twice be forced to resign from the NAACP, the pioneering civil rights organization that he helped to found. And of even greater consequence, he would be hounded during the McCarthy era and beyond it by the United States government itself for his supposedly radical ideas. The historian Andrew Lanham offers a harrowing summary in the Boston Review of this time in the 9th decade of the great Du Bois's life, and I quote, "He was indicted, arrested, and arraigned in federal court as an agent of the Soviet Union. Why? Because he had circulated a petition protesting nuclear weapons. The trial and the publicity around it ruined his career. He was left scrabbling to earn enough money just to buy groceries. And the trial hardly ended the state persecution. In 1952, the State Department illegally revoked Du Bois's passport. The Supreme Court restored passport rights for suspected communists in 1958, and 3 years later, Du Bois used his regained freedom of travel to become an expat in newly post-colonial Ghana. But while he was there, the State Department refused to renew his passport, effectively annulling his United States citizenship. The American civil rights icon became a Ghanaian citizen and died there on the eve of the March on Washington in August 1963. The last thing he did before he went to bed was send Dr. King a cable, went to sleep, and transitioned. Du Bois never missed a moment for glory, believe me. To be clear, Dr. Du Bois was not just seen as a renegade. In theory, he was made an outlaw, a prisoner, an enemy of the state by the government of the United States of America, by the country whose foundational freedom of speech he held so dear and that he exercised so brilliantly, even to his own peril, even unto exile. Having felt chased out by the country of his birth and set apart as a problem, as the racist discourse of the time put it, Du Bois would be astonished to learn that his image today graces a United States postal stamp. He would be stunned that the university that he so loved, but of which he never felt an integral part, would name the leading research institute in the field of African and African American studies in his name, and that it would go on to name the medal honoring the greatest achievements in black culture, the medal that we present today to these distinguished women and men sitting on this stage in his honor. Happily, his marble bust now rests in the adjacent Memorial Hall, Harvard's equivalent of a Hall of Fame. Why do we honor this man? Why do we honor him today? In addition to his being the most prolific and most profound thinker in the history of the African American people, we honor him, ladies and gentlemen, for the courage of his convictions, even in the face of persecution, for his refusal to flinch as he relentlessly spoke truth to power, for his deep-seated belief that no idea and no civilization was foreign to him, and that the civilizations that he loved and did so much to define, the sublime civilizations created throughout the black world, had earned their rightful place at the welcome table of the world's great cultures. I cite this history to say that, like Dr. Du Bois, we must always have the courage of our convictions, that we must not back down from our commitments to protect the freedom of speech and expression that makes us who we are as Americans, and that we must follow lines of inquiry boldly without shutting down competing lines of inquiry that may not mirror and that indeed fundamentally challenge our own. In her welcome back letter to the students, faculty, and staff in the Faculty of Arts and Sciences, Dean Hoekstra, a scientist, put this beautifully. She said, "Harvard is a place where you have the freedom to wonder aloud, to change your mind, or change the mind of others, the freedom to follow your curiosity, to ask questions, to challenge the status quo. This freedom, she concluded, is at the heart of our academic mission. The freedom of wonder, of curiosity, of inquiry. These, ladies and gentlemen, are the hallmarks of Dr. Du Bois's work and the foundational principles of the Hutchins Center. One of the things of which I'm proudest about the Hutchins Center is that it is a place founded on the principles of and dedicated to the protection of freedom of speech and thought, colloquy, and the free exchange of ideas without penalty, without the fear of being mocked or canceled, a term that I detest. We stand strong for the value of free speech, even for the expression of ideas that counter our own deep-seated and passionately held beliefs, ideas with which we most certainly do not agree. This is what the highest form of education prepares us for: to think, to make an argument, to defend that argument, to speak, write, and work in support of our values. And may the best argument win. On these fundamental principles, central to a nurturing learning environment, we, ladies and gentlemen, must never, ever yield. My friend, the great philosopher Kwame Anthony Appiah, last week had this to say about the mutual exchange of ideas, and I'm quoting, "The trouble doesn't come when we disagree, that's inevitable. The trouble comes when conversation is edged by another sentiment. Die, heretic, when differences of partisan identity swamp all other identities, including our shared American identity that we have in common. Our differences are real: gender, sexuality, color, class, creed, country, culture. All such categories can bring some people together and keep other people apart. You must look at the world from somewhere and as someone, a person with a specific set of identities, a perspective. Yet you also have the capacity as a human being to stand at a certain distance from yourself and grasp that you are a person among persons, and that others, like you, may be entitled to make their lives in the light of their own aims and their own understanding," unquote. It is in this spirit of dialogue and debate, empathy and understanding, ladies and gentlemen, of communication, community, and colloquy, of veritas, civitas, and communitas, that I'm thrilled to welcome each of you today to our glorious ceremony, at which we honor the 6 outstanding individuals seated to my left on this stage this afternoon, who embody these principles in the most spectacular ways. Without further ado, let's give it up for the 2024 W.E.B. Du Bois Medal. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Dr. Professor. And thank you, Chair Hutchins, to all the wonderful team at the Center for Advancing African American Studies here at Harvard and beyond. It's an honor to be here with all of you this afternoon. Congratulations to all of the medalists, and thank you for your immense contributions to our nation and to our culture. It's my great honor to present the W.E.B. Du Bois Medal to coach, mentor, and friend, Kathy Delaney Smith. I had the good fortune to play for Kathy from 1988 to 1992, and yes, even then we called her Kathy. You know, one of the things that W.E.B. Du Bois said was that, and I quote, he was talking about young people. He said, quote, "Learn more from what you are than what you teach." Young people learn more from what you are than what you teach. And I think Kathy Delaney Smith embodies that truth. She is a leader by example. As head coach of the women's basketball team from 1982 to 2022, Kathy's teams won 630 games and 11 Ivy League titles. She won 3 gold medals coaching USA teams in international tournaments. She was part of the inaugural class inducted into the New England Basketball Hall of Fame. She retired in 2022 as the winningest coach of any sport, men's or women's, in the history of the Ivy League. The position she vacated was renamed the Kathy Delaney Smith Head Coach for Women's Basketball, which is now held by Coach Carrie Moore. Kathy's success winning games only describes a small part of her influence and respect. I'm mentioning a lot of accolades, awards, games won, recognition, all important. But I think what's important here is something that one of our other medalists has written so powerfully about, Kimberlé Crenshaw, when she speaks of intersectionality. One of the things that Du Bois is known for, but maybe not as much known for, is his early advocacy for women's rights. And in this moment in our nation, where we truly must see the intersectionality in all of us, and that the fight for one is a fight for all, I'll mention a few other things about our friend. Among Kathy's other honors, she received the Gilda Radner Award for her advocacy of breast cancer research and the bravery she showed in her own battle with it some years ago. Her national peers in the Women's Basketball Coaches Association presented her with a Carol Ekman Award for her courage, character, and integrity. She currently serves on the board of directors for Shooting Touch, which is a global organization which uses basketball, Spike would like this, to bridge gaps for young people and women who are facing racial, gender, and economic inequalities. Kathy's always been a force for positive social change, and for all of us who played for her, we know something about her history and what she made possible for so many young women and girls who followed. She began at the age of 21. In 1971, when she was hired as the girls' basketball coach at Westwood High School. In her words, when she was asked, quote, sweetly and nicely, when she asked sweetly and nicely for luxuries like practice time, assistant coaches, salary equity, and even uniforms, she was firmly told no. So she started filing lawsuits under this new law that was created, Title IX. And soon she started to get what her team needed. She went on to lead Westwood and high school girls basketball in Massachusetts to unprecedented heights. After winning state championships, she then came to this university, in large part because of her and the university's mutual commitment to gender equity in sports. We can see the results of her labors and that of many others in the success of today's WNBA. Women's sports are indeed entering a new era. Arenas are filling up with fans of all ages and genders. Diverse women athletes are using their voices and asserting their identities in new and exciting, powerful ways. Girls are growing up with a whole new world of role models and opportunities. Kathy's ability to motivate both personal and social change is rooted in a philosophy that she calls, quote, act as if. It's the idea that believing hard goals are attainable and that belief is what really makes them achievable. Now, one memorable example, she's the first coach to lead a 16 seed over a #1 seed in the NCAA tournament. That was the Crimson's victory over Stanford on Stanford's home court back in 1998. I mention that because the captain of that team and a person who helped Kathy propel that victory is Allison Feaster, class in 1998. She's the first player to play, to win the Ivy League Player of the Year 3 times over. She went on to play in the WNBA. She's now the vice president for the Boston Celtics of team operations and organizational growth. And I mention that because Allison would have liked to have been here today. Something that Allison wrote about Kathy is this, and I quote, "What all these and her many other recognitions stem from is her deep empathy, her commitment to building her players' physical and mental strength and the development of their character, and her remarkable ability to build family out of teams whose players come from different walks of life and so many different identities." I think that sums up beautifully what Kathy Delaney Smith is about. She certainly had an impact on Allison Feaster, and she certainly had an impact on me. She helped me become a better basketball player, a better person, and a better leader. Whether becoming a civil rights attorney or attorney general, or now with the privilege of serving as the first woman elected governor of Massachusetts, I would not be here today were it not for the guidance and the example of Kathy Delaney Smith. And I know hundreds of others, thousands of others, can say the same. Because once Kathy is in your life, you no longer accept barriers, you only see possibilities. And now, in recognition of her long service to the students and players of Harvard University and her unyielding commitment to the fight for justice and equality, the Hutchins Center presents the W.E.B. Du Bois Medal to Kathy Delaney Smith.
Okay, it's right height. Thank you, Mara. Who would have believed the governor of the state of Massachusetts presenting to me? In my wildest dreams, I never would have thought that would ever happen. When I first started recruiting Mara, I thought she was just a really good point guard. She could pass, she could shoot, she could boss her teammates around the floor. She's an instinctive leader. And so it's no surprise that years later, she's everyone's very favorite governor of the state of Massachusetts. She's still bossing people around in a good way. She's so good at what she does that it goes without saying that I need to have some credit because I had her in her formative years. Just saying. Thank you to the selection committee and all the people that do the work behind the scenes for an event like this. There's an enormous amount of work, and to get it all going and run smoothly is incredible. Special thanks to Kingsley. I don't know where you are, but she was enormously helpful to me. She's thrilled that I'm no longer going to email her, so don't worry. Special thanks to the Hutchins Center, which I think is one of Harvard's treasures, along with Glenn Hutchins and Professor Gates. I don't think there's an entity like that in this country. This is truly a treasure. And when my team and I would come to these events, we would be inspired, we would be motivated and determined to leave and do more work, because there's still lots of work to be done. Congratulations to all the honorees. I am amazed by who you are, what you have done, what you continue to do. In fact, when I received the call that I was going to be a recipient, I worried that it was a mistake. And I found myself walking around my house panicking about this possibility. You are all so accomplished, so selfless, so brilliant. I have this strong urge to sing the song we all know, the Sesame Street song, "One of Us is Not Like the Others." I will not sing it because, quite honestly, all my family and friends have been singing it to me for 2 or 3 weeks. So I have to ask myself, how did I make this list? Please don't be shocked when I tell you, I know I am not famous. I thought about all of the incredible women that I coached here at Harvard, Mara being at the top of the list, for 40 years. And I am so proud of who they are, what they are doing. Some of them are here tonight. If I could go around and introduce you to them, you would be blown away. They are incredible. They are breaking through glass ceilings. They are mentoring and parenting future generations of leaders. Some of them are using sport as a great classroom. I'm a big believer that sport is one of our country's great classrooms here at Harvard. I proved it by the women that are out there and learned from being in the basketball program. I have fought for equity and inclusion my entire life. Hopefully I taught that to all of my players as well, and I'm proud to say they took the baton and they are not afraid to stand up and speak, and they are making a huge difference in the world. And I think you all have the possibility in this room to do the very same thing. I, in fact, have just finished a book called Grit and Wit, Empowering Lives and Leaders, that I wrote about my players and their journey through Harvard basketball and how sport as a classroom at Harvard has impacted their lives. So when it's published, which will be shortly, please buy a copy. My last thought is to say, please don't underestimate the power of the grassroots effort. I am here, that's what I represent. I'm here because I am grassroots. I cannot tell you the number of times someone has said to me that I have changed their life when I didn't even know I was doing it. And so you don't have to be famous. You just have to do the little things. And I think I did all those little things for 40 years of incredible women at Harvard. And as I said, they are out there making a huge difference. I'm imploring all of you to be inspired by this event and don't stop working, because we're not there yet. Thank you, and I am so honored.
Hello, I'm Sarah Gans-Blythe. I'm the director of the Harvard Art Museums, and I am just thrilled to be here to introduce someone I have admired for so very long. In 2020, our medalist, Thelma Golden, was asked 2 questions that reveal the scope of her ambition and the depth of her gifts. What drives you? She replied, my deep belief in more space for Black artists. The follow-up, what do you want to change? Her response, everything. I want to change our cultural institutions so that they are as richly diverse as our culture. Thelma Golden is director and chief curator of the Studio Museum in Harlem, the world's leading institution dedicated to artists of African descent. As a student at Smith College, where she received a BA in art history and African American studies, she started at the Studio Museum as an intern. Following graduation, she returned as a curatorial intern. She began her rise to museum leadership at the Whitney Museum of American Art, where in 1993, she was appointed associate curator. The exhibitions she organized at the Whitney, including the 1993 Whitney Biennial and the groundbreaking exhibition Black Male, Representations of Masculinity in American Art, were field-defining. They were both canon-breaking and canon-building. Adam Weinberg, the former director of the Whitney, said Golden's work reframed art history, adding, Thelma was instrumental in making possible a whole rethinking, not just of African American art, but of American art. It's no wonder that the New Yorker profile earlier this year by Calvin Tompkins headlined the art world before and after Thelma Golden. Thelma became the Studio Museum's deputy director for exhibitions and programs in 2000 and was named director and chief curator in 2005, following the influential tenure of Lowry Stokes Sims, whom she credits as one of her mentors, along with the wonderful Mary Schmidt Campbell. At the Studio Museum, she has been committed to creating studio and intellectual space for artists. The museum was founded in 1968 to provide a space that embraces the work of Black artists and fuels their creativity in community with one another. The Studio Museum is now poised to expand its influence with the first ever purpose-built facility, an enormous undertaking that will transform the landscape of the art world, both locally in Harlem and globally in its reach. Thelma's enduring commitment to artists has been so critical to the lives of so many. Rashid Johnson, who at the young age of 24 was included in her 2001 exhibition Freestyle, put it this way: how many people can say they built a canon? As many times as Thelma has. All the significant artists you see today came through the door kicked wide open by Thelma Golden. The landscape you see today that is full with Black creative voices, that's what Thelma built. None of us felt we had to be representatives of our culture. We could just be critical thinkers. We could just be the artists we wanted to be. This is testament to Thelma's incredible generosity. As she has noted, when I was 15, I wanted to be a curator. Who says that? I was always on this path. I understood that my time was never my own. It had to make sense for others. I had to open up space for others. Golden's transformative work has been honored countless times before today. The recipient of several honorary doctorates, including from her alma mater, Smith College, Golden received the Audrey Ermis Award for Curatorial Excellence from the Center of Curatorial Studies at Bard College in 2010, and in 2018, she was honored with the J. Paul Getty Medal. She has also held numerous fellowships, including the Henry Crown Fellowship in 2008 and the Ford Foundation Fellowship in 2015. She is the first curator to win the Dorothy and Lillian Gish Prize, and earlier this year, she was named to Time Magazine's list of the 100 most influential people in the world. Let's return to Thelma's own words about her mission. I take seriously the responsibility to represent what it means to believe in the power and the possibility of diversity and inclusion in our cultural world. I see it as a privilege to represent what that means, and I don't take it lightly at all. The Hutchins Center recognizes Thelma Golden with the W.E.B. Du Bois Medal for her tireless work and her boundless innovations on behalf of Black art and Black artists, and for her commitment to creating space for diversity in a world that she has so beautifully transformed. Oh, that's you. Sorry. That would have been a challenge.
Good evening. Good evening. Thank you, Sarah, for that amazing introduction and for presenting this medal, which I cherish, to me. My sincere thanks also go out to Glenn Hutchins for your incredible support of this endeavor and what it means for Black scholarship and its ability to flourish and grow. I am on this stage receiving this medal for many reasons, but central to that is the fact that as W.E.B. Du Bois stood on this stage as the first African American to earn a doctorate here, my work was influenced by the intellectual giant of my generation, and that is Dr. Henry Louis Gates, Jr. In the late 1980s, Skip's ability to change the canon is what made it possible for me and a generation of us to major in African American studies and have the discipline inform the path of our intellectual work. It is that work that makes it possible for me to do this work today, and it is through Skip's incredible insight, support, and love that I have been able to walk this path with so much strength and power. So thank you for that, Skip. It is incredible to be on this stage receiving this medal with this dazzling group of fellow medalists. I am inspired by you all, thrilled to be sharing this moment. So in an event that celebrates Du Bois, I, as a curator, have to start with thinking about the way in which Du Bois was keenly attuned to the profound impact of Black literature and art. We see that quite specifically in his role as the editor and founder of The Crisis. It was his sharp criticism and thinking, about art and his resolve to not only reveal but claim history's truths that inspired the vital life of much of Black creativity that exists today. When I reflect on Dr. Du Bois's impact, as well as the Studio Museum where I am privileged to lead's past, I am proud to think about this extraordinary tradition that we are a part of. I stand here really in gratitude for receiving this medal, but I have to put that gratitude towards those who made it possible for me to be here. So I humbly accept this on behalf of the artist, educator, philanthropist, and community activist who founded the Studio Museum in Harlem in 1968, a year of incredible upheaval, but also immense hope, and where we established the clarity in our mission to inspire the dynamic exchange of ideas about art and society. But I also accept this medal on behalf of the hundreds of artists who've created, exhibited, and given voice to their works during the Studio Museum's history. The hundreds of museum professionals who at every level have dedicated themselves to the institution, the trustees, including Dr. Gates, who have given so selflessly to not only bring our museum past, present, and future to life, but to really making it possible in this moment to grow a new Studio Museum right on 125th Street. I also celebrate the directors of the institutions who came before me and made this possible. As Sarah said, when I was 15 years old, I decided I wanted to be a contemporary art curator. I was already deeply enamored by the inspiration I felt in the presence of great works of art and wanted to make meaning with artists and their artwork by making exhibitions. It has been a privilege for over 30 years to work with artists, to work for artists, to enable and envision on their behalf. It has been an adventure to allow their visions and voices to lead me. It has been a sacred honor to hold the legacies of Black artists who are no longer with us, and a constant source of inspiration to hold space for the artistic voices just beginning to emerge today. It is a constant source of joy to experience art in museums with audiences and to ensure that museums are open and welcoming and accessible to all. I love museums for their significant role as our civic spaces, as places for us to engage with art and each other. I believe deeply in the enduring power and endless possibility of art. So when I consider all that has created me and all who I am still becoming, I think of it as essentially about making space for artists. Cultural space, intellectual space, physical space, and always the spiritual space created by our voices and our visions. So I accept this medal with a great amount of humility, but also with a great sense of possibility of all the work to come that stands in the legacy of W.E.B. Du Bois. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is James Manyika, and what an incredible ceremony to honor the legacy of Dr. Du Bois, and what an inspiring set of honorees who represent that legacy so wonderfully well. And what an honor it is for me to be up here to do this and honor Strive Masiyiwa, who I should actually say is a brother from another mother in my world. Well, let me begin. Last year, I sat down with Strive as part of our Google series, Dialogues on Technology and Society. Most of our conversation consisted of me asking Strive to share with the audience insights from his years of leadership at the intersection of technology and transformational change in Africa, and on the new frontier of AI and what it could mean for us. Towards the end of our conversation, Strive, as he often does, turned the tables and asked me what excited me most about the possibilities of AI. As part of my answer, I said something like that, as with any foundational technology, we have a responsibility to be both bold and responsible, and to ensure it benefits people everywhere, which to my mind is a perfect summary of what Strive Masiyiwa brilliantly does and has done for years. Now, Strive may not be a household name around here, but perhaps after tonight he will be. So allow me a few minutes to talk about my friend Strive and why he inspires so many, including me. Strive graduated with a Bachelor of Science degree in Electrical and Electronic Engineering from the University of Cardiff in 1983 and returned to our native Zimbabwe the following year. The country had just transitioned from white-ruled Rhodesia to Zimbabwe. What he found was a country almost entirely lacking in connectivity. The wait for a phone line was 14 years, and 75% of the population had never had a phone or access to one. The recently graduated engineer went to work to build a mobile phone network, not just in Zimbabwe, but in multiple countries across Africa. This was a bold move at the time, given that this was the early 90s and early in mobile telephony. He became an evangelist for mobile telephony, as he puts it. I'd say a pioneer. He placed the first mobile call in Nigeria, and today 80% of Africans, rich and poor, have mobile phones. None of this was easy, of course, with challenges that included taking strong men to constitutional courts. Stories for another day. But his relentless efforts have been and continue to be directed at transforming lives and opening possibilities for economic prosperity for many through technology, but especially those that could be left behind in communities and countries. Beyond mobile telephony, as the founder and chairman of Econet and of Cassava Technologies and other ventures, Strive has built Africa's longest open access cross-border fiber broadband network, spanning over 68,000 miles, reaching from Cape Town to Cairo. Africa's largest network of interconnected data centers, cloud and cybersecurity services, fintech and on-demand digital platforms, and more. It is important to note that his successes as an entrepreneur have not stopped at Africa's shores. Like the African diaspora itself, they've touched every continent, from the Americas to Europe to New Zealand. Today, he runs a global tech portfolio in more than 40 countries on 4 continents. His deepest concern with the growth of innovation industries is that Africa and its diaspora participate in their creation, development, and growth. Too often, Africa and its diaspora are left out, thought of merely as users of technology and not the creators or shapers of it. Strive's mission is to change that. He says, quote, "We have to be at the top tables and cap tables and shaping this, build our own enterprises, transform our societies, create wealth, not just as users of systems where others have the economic benefit. And we have to make sure that the youth of Africa and its diaspora, with their unbounded creative and entrepreneurial energy, are not left out of this and are at the forefront." Now, you'd be forgiven in thinking that Strive's impact is only as an entrepreneur, which he is, but that's just part of his story. His concerns are far broader than that. He's routinely called to assist heads of state, not just one or two, but in the case of Africa, all of them, and not just once. In 2014, the chair of the African Union, on behalf of his fellow heads of state, called him to help lead the task force for the Ebola crisis in West Africa. When COVID struck in 2020, the African Union heads of state again appointed him the AU czar and special envoy to coordinate Africa's purchase and distributions of vaccines across the continent. In 2022, the AU heads of state again asked him to lead a task force on food security. I've had my own ringside experiences of seeing Strive at this a few times. I remember when I served as the vice chair of President Obama's Global Development Council, and the president convened the Global Development Summit at the White House in 2016. It was Strive who, at the president's request, had the honor of introducing President Obama and highlighting some of the initiatives they'd worked on together. And even just last week, again, I had a ringside seat as I watched Strive at the UN General Assembly set of meetings last week. And it's not just heads of state. Many others seek Strive's advice and collaboration. He's been a board member and trustee to major global companies and organizations, including Unilever, Netflix, the Gates Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, the US Holocaust Memorial Museum, the Asia Society, Morehouse, just to name a few. But perhaps his most personal intervention in ensuring that Africans thrive is in his and his wife Tsitsi's philanthropic ventures. The equally impressive Tsitsi is here tonight, by the way. You should all get to meet her. Their Higher Life Foundation has supported over 300,000 scholarships for African students. And has also gone on to sponsor many of them in America, the UK, and Asia. They also created Delta Philanthropies, which focuses on social impact investment, human capital development in health, education, rural transformation, and disaster relief and preparedness in Africa. And also as co-chair of Grow Africa, an investment forum for Africa's agriculture, they've mobilized over $15 billion investments for African agriculture. Strive has been recognized many times over for his impact. For example, he's been selected 3 times by Fortune for its annual list of the world's 50 greatest leaders. Bloomberg named him one of the 50 most influential people in the world. He's received the Norman Borlaug Medallion and the World Food Prize in recognition of his chairmanship of the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, co-founded with Kofi Annan, Bill Gates, and the Rockefeller Foundation, to help 400,000 African small farmers. He's been elected an honorary fellow of the African Academy of Sciences and an international honorary fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. He holds honorary degrees from Yale, Morehouse, Nelson Mandela University, and the University of Cardiff. And today, the Hutchins Center for African and African American Research recognizes Strive Masiyiwa for his decades of leadership and impact on a very large and global canvas and touching so many. Knowing him as I do and as long as I have, I can say with confidence that this honor and what it represents will be deeply meaningful to him. Distinguished guests, I offer you Strive Masiyiwa.
Wow, wow. Thank you, James, for those amazing words, such kind remarks. For a while, I was wondering what you were talking about. Thank you so much, my brother. Well, it's amazing to be in this hallowed hall. And thank you, Skip, for inviting me. I always say of Skip, he's the only non-African I fight with over the history of Africa. Sarah, James's wife, says she always wants to be the fly on the wall when Skip and I have a go at how Africa is. And Skip is truly a great African. Thank you so much. Really, I'm humbled indeed to be here. I had no idea what to expect. It's kind of like being the groom, you know, and someone's about to talk about your life. You don't know what they're going to say. Thank you, James, once again for those kind remarks. Really, I'll be brief. You know, I first came to my own consciousness as a young black man through the works of W.E.B. Du Bois. I was growing up as a young African in the 1970s in Southern Africa. He was, to us, as great an African hero as Kwame Nkrumah, Joshua Nkomo, or any of our greatest leaders, Mandela, and so forth. We read him. I remember my copy of his book. We would stick back the pages because there was no Amazon in those days. And the books would go around, and we'd all have copies of his books with us. Because he was such what he brought to us was this consciousness of who we are as a people, our history, our connectivity. I had the opportunity, and one of the great opportunities of my life was in 1994, after Mandela became president of South Africa. Bill Clinton, then president of the United States, set up a small group led by Ambassador Andrew Young and the Reverend Leon Sullivan. And I guess they just needed a young boy to hang around with in Africa. But they were brought together to look at the relationship and how to build the relationship between Africa and African Americans in the diaspora. I sat at the knee of Leon Sullivan, and he implored me, and he would say, "Strive, we must build a bridge between the United States, the Caribbean, and Africa. That is your mission." And that was the work of W.E.B. Du Bois. And so it didn't take long for me to find the man who had picked up his mantle. He was small in stature like myself. And the first time we met, you know, this African American who said he had traveled down the Congo River, and I immediately said, "Yeah, you've been on the Congo?" He said, "Yes." And we became fast friends, and with my friend James Manyika. Truly, if we were to have an African Mount Rushmore, W.E.B. Du Bois stands strong on that mountain. Thank you for honoring him. Thank you for helping us strengthen and build this bridge. Glenn, thank you. I'm here to declare you an honorary African. Because, by the way, the Africans come in every color, in every religion, in every ethnicity. We are diversity itself from the very womb of the earth. Thank you very much. I'm greatly honored. God bless you.
Good evening. My name's John Manning. I'm Harvard University's provost. I'm very grateful to be here tonight to help celebrate these inspiring honorands and to read a passage from our spiritual strivings from The Souls of Black Folk by W.E.B. Du Bois. Between me and the other world, there is ever an unasked question. Unasked by some through feelings of delicacy, by others through the difficulty of rightly framing it. All, nevertheless, flutter around it. They approach me in a half-hesitant sort of way, eye me curiously or compassionately, and then, instead of saying directly, "How does it feel to be a problem?" they say, "I know an excellent colored man in my town," or "I fought at Mechanicsville," or "Do not these Southern outrages make your blood boil?" At these I smile, or am interested, or reduce the boiling to a simmer, as the occasion may require. To the real question, how does it feel to be a problem? I answer seldom a word. And yet being a problem is a strange experience, peculiar even for one who has never been anything else, save perhaps in babyhood and in Europe. It is in the early days of rollicking boyhood that the revelation first bursts upon one, all in a day, as it were. I remember well when the shadow swept across me. I was a little thing, away up in the hills of New England, where the dark Housatonic winds between Hoosac and Agonek to the sea. In a wee wooden schoolhouse, something put it into the boys' and girls' heads to buy gorgeous visiting cards, 10 cents a package, and exchange. The exchange was merry, till one girl, a tall newcomer, refused my card. Refused it peremptorily with a glance. Then it dawned upon me with a certain suddenness that I was different from the others, or like mayhap in heart and life and longing, but shut out from their world by a vast veil. I had thereafter no desire to tear down that veil, to creep through. I held all beyond it in common contempt, and lived above it in a region of blue sky and great wandering shadows. That sky was bluest when I could beat my mates at examination time, or beat them at a foot race, or even beat their stringy heads. Alas, with the years, all this fine contempt began to fade, for the words I longed for and all their dazzling opportunities were theirs, not mine. But they should not keep these prizes, I said. Some, all I would wrest from them. Just how I would do it, I could never decide. By reading law, by healing the sick, by telling the wonderful tales that swam in my head. Some way.
Good evening. My name is Giriel Charles, and I am a law professor at Harvard Law School. And it is my distinctive pleasure to introduce one of this world's legal giants and public intellectuals. Few individuals, intellectuals, academics have changed how society thinks about an issue or a problem as Professor Kimberlé W. Crenshaw. She is a shaper of worlds, shaper of imagination, and a paradigm shifter. She has shifted how we understand a set of fundamental problems, a set of fundamental questions, and brought us insight where we did not think possible. Professor Crenshaw is the Promise Institute Chair of Human Rights at UCLA Law School, Isidore, and the Seville Sulzbacher Professor of Law at Columbia Law School. She holds chaired professors at 2 distinguished law schools. She is also the co-founder and executive director of the African American Policy Forum, one of the country's leading social justice think tanks, and the faculty director of the Center for Intersectionality and Social Policy at Columbia Law School. I have had the privilege of teaching as well as reading Professor Crenshaw's work. And I can say that it is as insightful, impactful, intellectually demanding, soul rewarding as one could imagine. She is one of the founders of critical race theory and a leading Black feminist. There truly is no area of legal work that her scholarship, her words have not shaped and influenced. It is Crenshaw's work that has helped us to understand how legal formality, the role that law plays in repackaging legal remedies as racism. In an interview last year with the 19th, Crenshaw offered succinct definitions of both critical race theory and intersectionality. So here for a moment, we're going to use her words and we're going to go to school for a brief second. And I promise not to charge you tuition. She defined critical race theory as the study of how and why patterns of race inequality continue to reproduce themselves more than 60 years after the passage of civil rights laws. Right. Why is it that notwithstanding formal equality, we still have structural inequality? So she says, look at the rules, practices, conventions, and law that allows for and facilitates a whole range of racial disparities. Critical race theory looks at how all of this happens, the justifications for it, and provides a diagnosis of the problem as well as a solution. This happens to be one of the most dangerous areas of study in not just our country, but in our world, apparently. In that same interview, she also defined intersectionality. Intersectionality, she said, is a concept that says that discrimination, inequality, marginalization often is not a singular dynamic. They exist in ways in which multiple forms of disadvantage impact people's lives. Intersectionality is an effort to make sure that no one is left out of commitments to equity, inclusion, and non-discrimination. What a fundamental goal and ideal. Professor Crenshaw argues that it is crucial for us to understand the ways that law is not neutral, that it frames actions, individuals, consequences, and it does so in very specific and particular ways. And we must understand the way that law interacts with race, gender, class, sexual orientation, and other types of identities. So if you want to understand fundamental inequality, you have to understand the way that law mediates that inequality. Her scholarship brings to light the ways in which Black women and girls historically have enjoyed far less protection under the law than their white sisters and their Black brothers. In a profile of her in The Guardian, Amma Modine wrote, for Crenshaw, her rewriting of history that centers the violence Black women experience is crucial for taking the Black freedom struggle forward. And so we know Say Her Name, for example, through her activism as well as her scholarship. She is responsible for several now foundational books and articles. The power of her work, of course, has given rise to predictable political criticism. I remember hearing the controversy about critical race theory, and it really surprised me, quite frankly, as a legal academic, because understanding and teaching that critical race theory is simply explaining the way that law interacts with race to subjugate and mediate and think through equality. I was surprised by what is it about this that is so controversial. And if you've read any of Professor Crenshaw's work, it is surprising that one, people would have a cursory understanding of that work, and two, that they would object to the deep truths that are found in her work. And so she's been criticized by a former president, a current governor, many school boards, but also the essential lessons that we take out of her work has empowered many generations, many students, many academics, and 300 or so high school students who are here today with their dedicated teachers and administrators show us that they are hungry for opportunities to learn about what truly is, a person who truly is a legend and a heroine for the work that she has done. Her work in the legal academy and the public sphere continues to transform our world, despite the best efforts of others to silence her. She has published in every major law review. She's the recipient of several prestigious awards. She has had an international impact, and her work on intersectionality was influential in the drafting of the Equality Clause in the South African Constitution, and was instrumental in ensuring that gender was included in the UN's 2001 World Conference on Racism's Declaration. For more than 30 years, Professor Kimberlé Crenshaw has given us the tools to understand gender inequality, to understand racial inequality, to understand how various forms of inequality intersect with one another, and how we can change and empower ourselves by changing the law. The Hutchins Center presents the W.E.B. Medal to Kimberlé Crenshaw for her transformative legal scholarship, her fierce commitment to truth, and her extraordinary bravery. Professor Crenshaw. Thank you.
Thank you, Guy, for such a kind and generous induction. Congratulations to all of my fellow honorees. It's an honor to join you on the stage. I am overwhelmed with pride to accept this medal from the Hutchins Center, from my alma mater, from Skip Gates, And of course, it's exceptionally meaningful for any race scholar to see one's name in the same sentence as the foremost scholar activist of the 20th century, Dr. Du Bois. Let me say a few words about how each piece of this moment fills me up this evening. I'm not sure if Skip knows this, but when we first met, I was struggling to keep my cool. I was a young scholar giving a talk at the law school on mapping the margins, where I'd taken issue with one of Skip's defenses of Two Live Crew. Now, I might have thought better of being so brazen to write a critique of one of the most famous scholars in the field, a MacArthur genius, and a powerful figure in the academy, as I was at that time barely a tenured law professor myself. But our little project in the law was an obscure field, barely recognized by folks in Black studies, so how would he know about what I had written, much less that I was on campus to give a talk about it? So imagine my surprise as I took the podium, and in walks the Skip Gates. Oh my God. I thought I would fall apart. But back then, they used to have a commercial that said, "Don't ever let them see you sweat." So I gripped the podium, and I kept it moving. Ever since, we've shared a lot. Conversations, consternation, and even his take no prisoners agent, David Kuhn, who's somewhere here. Skip, we don't always agree about everything, but from the very beginning, you were kind and welcoming to the young me. You've made room for debate, for grace, and for respect. That makes it all the more an honor to be standing here today. Thank you so much. And Glenn and Debbie, thank you so much for making all of this possible. As an alum, it is equally stunning to receive this medal in recognition of my contributions for Black studies. As you can imagine, especially if you know a little bit of my history, it's a bit complicated. When I arrived here 43 years ago this month, freshly minted with a degree in Africana Studies and Government, I was on a mission. At Cornell, Black studies had been my passion, my tool, my analytic, and law was the field to which I planned to apply it. It was a deep connection that stretched all the way back to my childhood. Like most Black families I knew, we had pictures on the wall of those that we should emulate. John Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Jesus. But in the Crenshaw household, we also had a picture of Thurgood Marshall and the photo of the 6 Black congressmen that served during the Reconstruction era. For my parents, this punctuated their identity as race men and women who believed in a Black we that carried the promises of Reconstruction forward, hewing close to the imperative that we lift every voice until victory is won. For my mother, this was literal. No one graduated from her classroom without memorizing all 3 verses of the Black National Anthem. So my belief that law could provide that special incantation, opening the doors to opportunity for the we, came naturally to someone like me, as did the need to study our condition in order to transform it. Black studies, as I understood it, was grounded in a fundamental principle that the yawning inequalities facing the we reflected deficits in the institutions and the practices that create inequality, not in us. We embraced the idea of the promissory note that King had demanded and that was still held at bay a century later. But then came a shocking realization when a notable civil rights figure, you'll have to read my upcoming book to know who it was, told me that Black studies as a discipline was fake, merely me-search, and that I was going to flame out at Harvard, my resolve then was fortified. It was, in fact, my grounding in Black studies that sharpened my view of what was missing in legal education, a concrete understanding of how law participated, facilitated, and insulated the hierarchies that shaped our lives. There was an incapacity to see that extended even to my liberal dean and professors who were at the time dragging their feet and offering courses to explore these questions or hiring professors who might teach it. I was part of a student movement that sprang to life demanding action. And when it didn't happen, we offered an alternative course, bringing in a variety of professors of color, we called them third world professors back then, to teach Derek Bell's groundbreaking text. Critical legal studies allies gave us independent credit, and with a few twists and turns, out of this student movement came critical race theory, a prism forged by Black and ethnic studies, gender studies, critical legal studies, and applied to race and gender power. And that eventually begat intersectionality. So from standing on the dean's desk in 1982 to standing here today as a recipient of this medal, I can truly say I've come full circle. And though I'd like it to be a fully satisfying story, as a proud beneficiary of affirmative action, as a child of my parents, and as a backtalker, I cannot hold this medal without asking myself what Du Bois would say about the commitments that are unraveling in this place and in this time. I would imagine that the author of Reconstruction would understand how efforts to undermine equity-based practices in institutions ranging from education to government have spread like an uncontrolled wildfire. It is Redemption 2.0. Attacks on critical race theory, on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and on Black history have been undertaken by legislation in 23 states, impacting 25 million school children, banning so-called divisive concepts defined as ideas and stories that cause discomfort. Calls to abolish the Department of Education, to defund Head Start, and coach even Sesame Street. To give even one parent in a school the right to veto a lesson about slavery or the Tulsa race riot or Ruby Bridges. It's only the most visible dimension of the attack on public education. The number of books banned in public schools nearly tripled last year to over 10,000, 47% being written by or featuring content relating to people of color or the LGBTQ communities. At the federal level, 100 groups, including former administration officials, have called for the elimination of the words diversity, equity, and inclusion from all government documents, and for the firing of any employee who fails to object to a training in diversity, equity, inclusion, or critical race theory. And it's not just the products of our presence that are being erased, but the very pipelines that bring us here, as the willing over-compliance to SFFA, the anti-affirmative action case, shows us across the terrain. The goal of Redemption 2.0 is clear: to erase usable knowledge about our past to create a different future, to silence the scholars and artists who create and advance it, and to rob future generations of the truths that lie beneath the ruins of freedom denied. For those of us who study and create Black studies, one thing is 100% clear. It's not a few of us that they're coming after. Every challenge we've made to the status quo, every effort to uncover the truth about the myth of our nation's immaculate conception is at stake. That's why we have to fight to sustain critical thinking about the ways that history stretches into this moment. Without it, our children are only left to understand inequality as a product of our own deficits, that we don't work hard enough, save enough, study enough, plan enough, or try hard enough. And we cannot be selective in what we fight. We have to fight against the censoring of our students as much as we fight against the censoring of our books. We have to fight against the selective use of comfort to suppress uncomfortable conversations, whether it's about the death and destruction in Tulsa 100 years ago or about the death and destruction in the Middle East today. We have to fight against the forced occupation in our minds as much as we fight against the control of our bodies. And when we commemorate towering figures, as we're doing here today, or our noteworthy victories, or our enduring stories, it is the lessons, the concepts, the ideas that are bequeathed to us, the hard-fought literacy to define and name our reality in order to transform it. I would hope that we all bristle whenever any institution tells us what parts of our archive are no longer valuable, as I did when I read from an official at the College Board that intersectionality need not be included in African American studies because it was no longer effective or had been drained of its meaning. What gives anyone other than us, we, the right to decide what we can and cannot learn, or what is or is not effective? What is our discipline of Black studies for it not to define and to decide what is usable knowledge for us and what is not? So as I take my seat in unending gratitude, let me end with Dr. Du Bois's ever-prescient imperative, tailor-made as a reminder to a nation, a world on edge. Nations reel and stagger on their way. They make hideous mistakes. They commit frightful wrongs. They do great and beautiful things. And shall we not best guide humanity by telling the truth about all of this, so far as the truth is ascertainable? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Hopi Hoekstra. I'm the Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Sciences. It's an honor to be here with all of you out here, an honor to be here with all of you on the stage, and an honor to follow Kimberlé Crenshaw and her incredibly moving words. Thank you. Thank you also to my colleague and friend, Skip Gates, for the invitation to be here to read a passage from On the Training of Black Men, The Souls of Black Folk, 1903. Herein the longing of Black men must have respect. The rich and the bitter depth of their experience, the unknown treasures of their inner life, the strange rendings of nature they have seen, may give the world new points of view and make their loving, living, and doing precious to all human hearts. And to themselves in these days that try their souls, the chance to soar in the dim blue air above the smoke is to their finer spirits boon and guerdon for what they lose on earth by being Black. I sit with Shakespeare, and he winces not. Across the color line, I move arm in arm with Balzac and Dumas, where smiling men and welcoming women glide in gilded halls. From out the caves of evening that swing between the strong-limbed earth and the tracery of the stars, I summon Aristotle and Aurelius, and what soul I will, and they come all graciously with no scorn nor condescension. So, wed with truth, I dwell above the veil.
Good evening to you all. I'm Alejandro de la Fuente. I direct the Afro-Latin American Research Institute at the Hutchins Center. Madam Vice President, bienvenida. Welcome to Harvard University. Each W.E.B. Du Bois Medal is a celebration, but today we have a first. It is the first time, ladies and gentlemen, that this award is presented to someone from Latin America. Now, that someone, my friends, is not just anyone. Francia Márquez Mina is a champion, una campeona, a champion for human rights, for racial justice, for environmental rights, for women's rights, a champion for peace, a champion for sustainable prosperity, a champion for Afro-descendant communities in her native Colombia and across all of Latin America, communities that represent between 1/4 and 1/3 of the population of the region. Latin America is Afro, and Francia Márquez Mina is the leader of Afro-Latin America. You know, last year, my students and postdocs in the Sawyer Seminar on Afro-Descendant Mobilization and Citizenship in Latin America here at Harvard learned about a key moment in the long history of struggles for racial justice in Latin America. It was in many ways a familiar and unremarkable story, the story of a Black rural community attempting to retain control over its territory. In the 2000s, the communities of the northern Cauca in Colombia endured waves of colonization by illegal gold mining outfits, coca growers, and a variety of paramilitary groups that sought to control these lucrative operations and the territories in which they took place. Local communities were pushed to the breaking point. It was not just the deforestation that mining inevitably produced, or that the mountain springs and rivers that were so integral to their livelihoods got contaminated with mercury and cyanide, poisoning the earth, destroying crops, killing livestock. Along with miners came prostitution, illegal drug use, and constant death threats against residents. So in 2014, 10 years ago, a group of women from one of these communities, the community of La Toma, began to strategize about how to respond to these existential threats, which affected them, their children, their neighbors. It was in these deliberations that the decision to march to the country's capital, to Bogotá, was made. The initial group came from La Toma, but women from other communities joined in what is now known as Mobilization of Afro-Descendant Women for the Care of Life and Ancestral Territories. They issued an eloquent statement, which I quote, "We are Black women from Northern Cauca. the descendants of enslaved Africans and experts on the ancestral value of our territories. We know that many of them paid for our freedom with their lives. We know about the blood that our ancestors shed to get these lands. We know that they worked for years and years under enslavement in order to leave it for us. They taught us not to sell the land. They understood that we should guarantee the permanence of our descendants in the territory. Leading the 80 women who walked 350 miles over 10 days to demand the attention of government authorities in Bogotá was a 33-year-old activist who had been involved in the defense of her community since she was literally a teenager, Francia Márquez Mina. She had reportedly told other women in La Toma, if no one is willing to go with me, I will walk to Bogotá with my 2 kids. Walk they did, forcing government authorities to meet with them and to heed their demands. The negotiations were, of course, very difficult. Some of those authorities described the women as disturbers of order and as obstacles to economic progress. In a memorable speech to those authorities, Vice President Márquez Mina replied, 400 years contributing to the construction of this country, and we are disturbers? Mining and the so-called engines of development are not generating peace. The only things that they are generating are misery, poverty, hunger, and displacement. We are not willing to have our children in the streets, at the traffic lights, so that people in suits and ties can look at them as if they were garbage. We are not willing to allow that to happen. We will remain in our territory because the territory has been our father and our mother, and it will continue to be for our children. That, ladies and gentlemen, is Francia Márquez Mina, the winner of the prestigious Goldman Environmental Prize in 2018, one of the 100 most influential women in the world, according to the BBC. That is the woman who was elected by Colombians to serve as their vice president, the woman who also functions as the Minister of Equality and Equity in her country. One more time, here, tonight, La Vicepresidenta leads the way. One more time, she creates new paths. For that leadership, for those paths, Madam Vice President, the Hutchins Center recognizes Francia Márquez Mina with the W.E.B. Du Bois Medal. The Vice President will say a few words in Spanish, and there will be translation in English, okay?
Muy buenas noches. Agradezco a quienes han hecho posible mi presencia en este espacio. Saludo al rector Alan Garber y a las autoridades académicas. Les presento mis respetos y reconocimiento. Profesor Henry Louis Gates, gracias por consolidar este importante centro de investigación. Su trabajo fortalece el legado que estamos construyendo en Colombia. Gracias por congregarnos aquí y por materializar el poder del Ubuntu, del soy porque somos.
Good evening. I would like to thank all those, thanks to whom I stand here among you today. Greetings to President Alan Garber and my respect and recognition to the academic authorities. Professor Henry Louis Gates, thank you for consolidating this important research center. Your work strengthens the heritage that we are building in Colombia. Thank you for bringing us together here and incarnate the power of Ubuntu.
Gracias al Centro Hutchins, gracias a Alejandro de la Fuente y a Bronia Greskovikova por abrir este camino. A Lari ha jugado un papel fundamental en el fortalecimiento de las agendas que lideran los pueblos afrodescendientes en América Latina por la justicia social y la libertad de nuestros pueblos.
Thank you, Alejandro de la Fuente and Bronia Greskovikova, for blazing this trail. Elari has played a fundamental role in shaping the agendas of people of African descent in the Americas in our struggle for social justice.
Agradezco el honor de compartir este momento con LeVar Burton, Kimberlé Crenshaw, Katie Delaney Smith, Thelma Golden, Spike Ice-T y Stray Masiyiwa.
I am grateful for having the honor of sharing this moment with LeVar Burton, Kimberlé Crenshaw, Kathy Delaney Smith, Thelma Golden, and Stray Masiyiwa.
Mi familia y mi territorio son lo más importante en mi vida. Dedico este reconocimiento a mi madre, Gloria María Mina López, a mi padre, Sigifredo Márquez Trujillo, a mis hijos, Carlos Adrián y Kevin Snyder, a mis nietos, Violeta y Harlan, a mi compañero de vida, Yerney Pinillo, y a todos los miembros de mi familia extensa. A mi comunidad Yolombó, La Toma, Suárez y el departamento del Cauca. A mi país, la República de Colombia, que me ha dado el honor de servir como su primera vicepresidenta afrodescendiente y ministra de la Igualdad y la Equidad.
The most important things in my life are my family and my territory. I would like to dedicate this award to my mother, Gloria María Mina López, and Sigifredo Márquez Trujillo, my father, to my sons, Carlos Adrián and Kevin Snyder, to my grandchildren, Violeta and Arlan, to my life partner, Yerney Pinillo, and to all the members of my extended family, to my community in Yolombó, La Toma, Suárez, and the province of Cauca, to my country, the Republic of Colombia, that has honored me with the opportunity to serve as its first woman vice president of African descent and minister of equality and equity.
Paulina, una mujer valiente de mi comunidad, nos decía siempre, quien no lucha no va al cielo, y para luchar debemos tener resistencia en el corazón. Estas palabras han sido siempre una inspiración para mí y me han permitido vencer obstáculos y adversidades para llegar a este momento de mi vida. Este lugar que hoy ocupo también es producto del legado de mis abuelas y mi madre. Ella, una mujer partera que con su sabiduría ha ayudado a construir sendas de libertad. De ella heredé el coraje, el talante y la valentía. De ella aprendí que no importa las veces que me caiga, debo siempre levantarme con dignidad.
Paulina Balanta, a brave woman in my community, would always tell us, those who don't fight won't go to heaven. And to fight, you must resist with your heart. I have always found inspiration in those words. They have allowed me to overcome obstacles and adversity to fight my way to this very moment in my life. The position I now hold stems from the heritage left by my grandmothers and my mother. My mother is a midwife who has paved a path to freedom with her wisdom. My courage, character, and bravery I have inherited from her. She taught me that no matter how many times I fall, I must always rise again in dignity.
Como madre y como hija de la diáspora, que he vivido el impacto del conflicto armado y de la violencia, sé del dolor de las madres que están perdiendo a sus hijos en Colombia y en el mundo. Nuestros esfuerzos siempre deben estar encaminados a impulsar la justicia, la paz y la libertad. Llamo a las mujeres del mundo a seguir levantando nuestras voces para que paren todas las guerras, porque después de cada guerra somos las mujeres las que recogemos los escombros que quedan. Lloramos y enterramos a nuestros hijos e hijas. Convoco a mi país a trabajar juntos y sin descanso por una sociedad más justa, igualitaria, equitativa y en paz, hasta que la dignidad se haga costumbre. Hoy extiendo este llamado a toda la humanidad.
As a mother and a daughter of the diaspora, one who has experienced the impact of violence and armed conflict, I can feel the pain of those mothers who are losing their children in Colombia and around the world. Our efforts must always strive for greater peace and social justice. I call unto the women of the world to keep raising our voices to put an end to all wars. For after every war, it is us, women, who pick up the rubble. It is us who bury our sons and daughters. I also urge the fellow citizens of my country to work together tirelessly to build a fairer and more equitable society until dignity becomes the norm. Today, I would like to extend this call to the whole of humanity.
En estos años de gobierno hemos materializado apuestas históricas como la creación del Ministerio de la Igualdad y la Equidad, programas como Universidad en tu Territorio, Jóvenes Guardianes de la Naturaleza y Agua es Vida, entre otros. Lanzamos la Comisión Nacional de Reparaciones Históricas sobre los efectos del racismo, la esclavitud y el colonialismo. Y avanzamos en la reglamentación de la Ley 70 de 1993. Así combatimos el racismo estructural que ha excluido de manera sistemática a la población afrodescendiente en Colombia.
Since we've been in office, we've achieved historical milestones, such as the creation of the Ministry of Equality and Equity, of programs such as University in our region, Young Guardians of Nature, Water is Life, among others. We created also the National Intersectoral Commission on Historical Reparations due to the effects of slavery, racism, and structural exclusion. And we've made progress on the implementation of Law 70 of 1993. This is how we fight structural racism, which has systematically excluded people of African descent.
Hace más de 400 años, mis ancestros y ancestras fueron arrancados del continente africano y traídos a América en condición de esclavitud. En 2023 retorné en condición de libertad y como vicepresidenta de la República. He visitado Kenia, Sudáfrica, Etiopía y Ghana, consolidando relaciones diplomáticas, comerciales, académicas y de conexión cultural. A través de la estrategia África 2022-2026 hemos aperturado la Embajada de Senegal y avanzamos hacia Etiopía. Hemos logrado una línea de conexión de carga aérea entre Etiopía y Colombia y el programa Ella Exporta a África para potenciar la equidad de género en el comercio internacional. Gracias a los equipos de trabajo que me han acompañado en esta tarea y a personas como ustedes que reconocen nuestra labor.
400 years ago, my ancestors were uprooted from the African continent and brought to Latin America enslaved. In 2023, I returned there as a free woman, as Vice President of the Republic of Colombia. I visited Kenya, South Africa, Ethiopia, and Ghana, and strengthened our diplomatic, commercial, academic, and cultural ties. Through our 2022-2026 Africa strategy, we've opened an embassy to Senegal, and another one in Ethiopia will soon follow. We've opened an air cargo connection between Ethiopia and Colombia and launched the She Exports to Africa program, which seeks to strengthen gender equity through trade. I would like to thank our teams that have helped me achieve this and people like you for recognizing the value of our work.
Les invito a acompañar estos programas maravillosos y a visitar Colombia, el país de la belleza. Seguimos trabajando sin descanso, resistiendo con el corazón bien puesto, como nos enseñó Paulina, hasta que la dignidad se haga costumbre. Muchas gracias.
I would like to invite you all to support those programs and to visit Colombia, the country of beauty. We will keep working tirelessly and resisting with our strong hearts, just like Paulina once taught us, until dignity becomes the norm. Thank you very much.
En esta oportunidad quiero desearle a la vicepresidenta Kamala Harris éxitos en su campaña presidencial. La invito a visitar Colombia para seguir construyendo juntas nuevas rutas de libertad. Vamos para adelante, que el pueblo no se rinde carajo.
On this occasion, I would also like to wish Vice President Kamala Harris great success in her presidential campaign. I herewith invite her to Colombia so that we can keep building new paths to freedom together. The people never gives up.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Tamiko Brown-Nagin, Dean of the Harvard Radcliffe Institute, and it is my pleasure to congratulate all of the honorees and to introduce LeVar Burton. LeVar Burton was born on a U.S. military base in Germany, where his father, a photographer, was stationed. His mother, an English teacher and social worker, inspired his passion for books. I grew up in a house where reading was like breathing. he recalled of his coming-of-age years in Sacramento, California. I like to say, in my mom's house, you either read a book or you got hit in the head with one. But you were going to have an experience with the written word. Access to literacy, of course, was a right that had been legally denied to the enslaved Black men and women whose families had been ripped apart by the Middle Passage and the brutal decades of bondage that followed during the height of the slave era in the US in the 18th and 19th centuries. LeVar Burton would help to immortalize one such character in a television role that would forever change his life and the country. His name was Kunta Kinte. The protagonist of the epic television miniseries adapting Alex Haley's Roots, the saga of an American family. More than 85% of American households watched at least part of the series when it aired over 8 nights in the winter of 1977. I wonder how many of you tuned in when, yes, I certainly was. I certainly did. Burton, who would explore the possibility of becoming a Catholic priest before being called to acting, was a 19-year-old student at the University of Southern California when he was cast in Roots. And after the series ran, the television critic for the Los Angeles Times wrote, "The image of young Kinte, crouched in a forest clearing, trembling like a deer, his eyes widening white with terror as the slave traders close in on him with their ropes and chains, is one of the most searing scenes in TV history. A scene one finds it hard to believe so untried a talent as Burton could have played." His performance earned him an Emmy nomination, yet it wasn't the only cultural phenomenon that LeVar Burton would help to advance. If Roots had taught the country to see its past more clearly, his indelible turn as Lieutenant Geordie LaForge took us into the future. In Star Trek, The Next Generation, which ran from 1987 to 1994, and extended into the cinematic universe as well. As a storyteller, Burton said, "I've been able to portray the Black experience in America from our enslavement to the stars." One issue in the constellation that persists is literacy. The need, the urgency, the freedom to read. And few have done more to inspire our exploration of the written word or raise awareness about its importance than LeVar Burton, who from 1983 to 2006 hosted the iconic PBS series Reading Rainbow. Generations of young readers grew up on the show, which garnered more than 250 awards, including a Peabody, 9 Parents' Choice Awards, and 25 Emmys. Through this work, LeVar Burton held up the right that had been stripped from the nations enslaved while introducing readers to the magic of books that spoke to them. In this way, his commitment to spreading the gospel of reading connected him to an heroic figure like Frederick Douglass, who in his classic 1845 narrative wrote of his epiphany, that his master had been the most adamant about denying him the freedom to read because, as Douglass realized, it was the key to the slave system's power over the enslaved and the gateway to their liberation. At a time when this freedom is again being challenged in the form of dangerous book bans around the country, Burton has used his platform to speak up, urging us to, quote, read the books they don't want you to. That's where the good stuff is. And serving as executive producer on the fittingly titled 2023 documentary, Right to Read. For his years of exemplary service as an actor interpreting our past and future, and for his tireless work as a joyful champion of reading as a fundamental right, the Hutchins Center proudly bestows on LeVar Burton the W.E.B. Du Bois Medal.
Goodness, thank you. Take a look. You will all be humming that tune for the next 72 hours. My apologies. My mother, and whenever I have an opportunity to speak my mother's name in public, I do, Irma Jean Christian, E-R-M-A-G-E-N-E. She had the masculine spelling of her middle name. I am the man I am, largely because she was the woman that she was. As was noted, she was my first teacher and insisted that we speak the King's English in her household, and it was mandatory that we read. My mother was an avid reader herself, a champion of the written word. And in Irma Jean's household, you not only were read to, but you had an opportunity to observe her reading every day for her own personal enjoyment, and that is the inspiration that has informed and animated my life. Frederick Douglass, as was just invoked, W.E.B. Du Bois, James Baldwin. That is the lineage, the spiritual lineage that I feel like I am an inheritor thereof. I am, by definition, a storyteller, an itinerant storyteller at that. My job is to go where the story needs to be told. As an actor, as a writer, a producer, a director, a podcaster, a public speaker, I'm a storyteller, walking in the tradition of storytellers that have informed and enlightened humanity since before spoken language. Alex Haley, the author of Roots, was a human being who had a destiny that was connected to storytelling. And it was the stories of his family that were told around his grandmother's Cynthia's porch during the summers that informed the phenomenon, the social and political phenomenon that Roots was. Alex was a mentor, and a friend, and was certainly a part of that storied lineage. Frederick Douglass, W.E.B. Du Bois, James Baldwin, Alex Haley. These are all men that I revere and whose work and words have shaped my life as well as so many others. Yes, from our enslavement to the stars, I have been able to recreate and represent Black life in America. And LeVar, the Reading Rainbow guy, is smack dab in the middle of that continuum. Here's how powerful our stories are. I believe that there is a through line that goes from the end of the Civil War and the Reconstruction of these United States through the Civil Rights era in the 60s, roots airs in America in the 70s, and in 1977 in the 70s, and in the 2000s, Barack Obama is elected president of the United States. Remove one link from that chain and it all falls apart. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the power of storytelling. I wish for you an endearing and unending relationship with not just the written word, but the stories that have emanated from all corners of this globe. Reading, y'all, is an empathy machine. And I wish for you every gift that the books that you read and the stories that you entertain have to offer. Peace and blessings to every single one of you. Thank you, Glenn and the Hutchins folks, for this incredible honor. I am speechless in your presence. My mother would be so freaking tickled to know that I am on the stage with you. Skip, brother, you know, when he first started doing Finding Your Roots, I was pissed. I was like, yes? I'm Kunta, when are you gonna get to me? And Skip, he told me, he said, the technology has advanced to the point where had we done you any sooner, we would not have found out the gems in your family that exist. So thank you, Dr. Gates, for your eminent wisdom and patience. You have changed my life, the way I see myself as a citizen of this country. I told you on the show that I am forever changed, and that is true. And we've had a couple of conversations now since I saw that episode for the first time, and the ripples continue to reverberate in me. In me. And they profoundly impact the way I go about my daily living in this world. I cannot thank you enough for that. And on behalf of my family, and on behalf of the family of Kunta Kinte, Geordie LaForge, and yours truly, thank you much.
What an extraordinary evening. Congratulations again to all of these Du Bois Medal honorees. After the benediction, please remain for the final selection by the Kuumba singers. God, for the gift of these absolute giants, we are eternally grateful. Now, God of endurance and encouragement, grant us all the grace to depart from here and go and do likewise. Teach, inspire, and build a better world. As it has been said, the world is equally balanced between good and evil. Our next act will tip the scale. Amen.
singer. That's our program, ladies and gentlemen. Give it up one more time for the 2024 winners of the Du Bois Medal at Harvard.